Welcome to episode 4 of PROSTEP Shipbuilding PLM Insights. My name is Johannes Lützenberger and I'm your host for today. As you may have recognized, the setting today looks a bit different, and the reason is that we are sending from our office in Hamburg, where our shipbuilding experts are located. That is PROSTEP, and we work together with manufacturing companies to implement digital continuity and traceability. Together with you, we build the PLM environment you need to address the challenges of today and tomorrow. As we are a vendor-neutral PLM solution provider, you can benefit from deep expert knowledge regarding PLM, PDM, and CAD systems. And we maintain development partnerships with the major vendors on the market. In addition, our background in various industries like automotive, aerospace, defense, transportation, and shipbuilding enables us to provide you synergies. Just over 2 years ago, the pandemic started, and shipbuilding industry was hit hard. The pandemic revealed many weaknesses in private and professional life. Shipbuilders had to deal with postponed or even cancelled orders. At that time, it was not possible to work at the same site or in the same space. This way, internal processes became challenging and collaboration with partners got even more difficult. This underlined the need for reliable PLM architecture. Today, we are glad to recognize that shipbuilding industry starts to recover and companies are getting more active. Since our last episode in September 2021, we got involved in several PLM projects, from strategy consulting to technical implementation and integration, from North America over Europe till Australia. And all these projects have one topic in common: enterprise architecture. But why is enterprise architecture such important? PLM architecture and information flow are central topics. The complexity of today's PLM landscapes is increasing, and they need a reliable information flow across locations and single source of truth. So, a reliable PLM architecture is a backbone of a sustainable PLM strategy. For that reason, we decided to provide this special episode on enterprise architecture today and provide you insights on our daily work in the project. With me today is my colleague Jan Bitomsky. He is PLM expert for shipbuilding industries and involved in several of these projects. Before we start, Jan, one last time to our audience. You can raise questions and remarks through the chat, and we will take care later on during the Q&A session. So Jan, you're involved in several projects, as I mentioned.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, what have you brought for us today?
Yes. Thank you, Johannes, and also welcome from my side. So my name is Jan Bitomsky, and I'm happy to be back online here with the Shipbuilding PLM Insight series. So as Johannes mentioned it, today's topic is all about enterprise architecture. Of course, with a focus on PLM in shipbuilding. Yeah. And this is also the reason why we call it PLM architecture sometimes, because we, as PROSTEP, we focus on PLM. When I'm in contact with you, people from the shipyards, design office, and other maritime organizations, I have different discussions about enterprise architecture. Yeah. So sometimes it is a completely new topic for you. Sometimes you know what it is, but you want to do something else, something new, something different. And sometimes the topic is already burned within your organization and you don't want to do it, but it is required sometimes. So because of this, I would like to start with a general and very simplified introduction today, based on my own experiences with you from the shipyards, from the shipbuilding industry. First, why should you do enterprise architecture? Yeah? It's all about your PLM architecture, it's all about your PLM landscapes, what you have today. As illustrated by this slide, these PLM architectures are very complex. Yeah? Some decades ago, the shipyard used the first CAD, CAM and nesting applications, for example, and that time the IT landscape were simple, highly specialized for a shipyard, but simple compared to the complexity of the today's architecture. So for example, I know some shipyards who has more than 30, 40 different IT applications. These need to work with each other. The business needs to do their processes with the help of these IT applications. So it's really, really complex. And this is also the reason why the enterprise architecture discipline evolved during the last decades. The aim is to manage this complexity. And this is very important that a shipyard manages this complexity. Otherwise, this complexity managed your business. And this is not what you want to have. So I hope, or first of all, there are some well-known standards out there. So for example, there's a standard called Archimate or TOGAF or Zachman. So these standards evolved during the last years. And today, I don't want to go into details because this would simply overload the episode 4. But if you are interested into more details about these standards, you can easily check several books, videos, web information. And my recommendation is really, when you want to do something with enterprise architecture, to get a better PLM architecture for your business, it really makes sense to have a look to one or two of these standards. Yeah, and because it's really good documented what you should do and what not. Yeah, so see it as a help. Some of our customers, they use one of these standards, and then we from PROSTEP, we are happy to follow these standards and to work along these frameworks or standards. Yeah. Now, I hope you still remember the PLM architecture example from the first episode. So that time I used this example to explain you the different business and IT domains which are shown here, which are part of every PLM architecture, not only at a shipyard, but at each organization. Today, I want to reuse this example to illustrate you at least the major components of an enterprise architecture standard, yeah? Even when I don't want to go into details today. So first, involvement and commitment of the organization. So this includes, for example, that you need to review your organizational context for the enterprise architecture. Yes, that's clear, easy to understand. Next, identifying sponsors, stakeholders, scope, budget, IT strategy, and so on. And maybe the most important point in the beginning, you need to define your architecture vision, and you need to define it as the target, what you want to achieve. Yeah? Once these organizational topics are done and you're happy with it, you can go to the next major component, which is about defining your architecture. Yeah? So this includes topics like you need to understand the as-is situation of your IT and business domains. Then it makes sense to define one or more target architectures to compare different options and to detail the vision, to make the vision more or closer to the reality. And then based on this, you need to understand the gap between the as-is situation and the vision target. Yeah? Once your architecture is defined, yeah, it's clear what you want to achieve, you can start with the next step, implementing the architecture. And for this, it is good to start with a consolidated gap analysis for the different business and IT domains. So for example, for a business domain, you have typical gaps regarding missing skills or not defined processes, or processes need to be updated because you have a new architecture in the background later on. Information gaps deals often with the quality of information, or that the information is not available and need to be created, that the new architecture will work. Application and technology gaps deals often with updates, implementation of new software, technologies, and so on. So finally, once we have done this, you should make your architecture work and plan the implementation. And As I said, this was a very simple overview, but at least you got hopefully the main scope of enterprise architecture, that it starts in the beginning with organization. You need to know what you want to do, and then step by step, and for this you can check these and other standards to get more detailed. You know what you need to do, that you have an implemented, good working PLM architecture in the end. So the last slide was more about the theoretical background, yeah? And our experience is that some shipyards already did a lot with enterprise architecture within the last years. Some shipyards are happy and some shipyards are not happy, yeah? So for example, we received the feedback that enterprise architecture produces a lot of paperwork, but provides only a limited value to the shipyard, yeah? And at this point, I fully agree. It's very easy to get lost into too many details. And for this, I have two main conclusions at this point already for you. Yeah? The first conclusion is doing nothing is not the solution. Yeah? Because PLM architectures, PLM landscapes, they are getting more and more complicated. And you need to manage this complexity. Otherwise, this complexity manages your daily work. Yeah? And this is not what you want to achieve. Second, you need to know what you want to do. Yeah? Otherwise, you will get lost into too many details within the enterprise architectures, which are maybe not required. Yeah? Often, the feedback is also about that the right interaction between the business architecture and the IT architecture is seen as one of the key challenges. Yeah? So these are two worlds. Based on this, we have a best practice for you. It's called information flow analysis. And this information flow analysis focuses on the most important information business objects at your company. So for example, you see here a network of the different business or the typical business objects of a shipyard. For example, the ship specification is an object containing the information regarding the specification. And this object is the input for the next business object, for example, the general arrangement plan, which is about the general arrangement plan and provides these information then for the next steps, the next processes and so on, and the next processes produce the next business objects. Quite easy to understand. Other typical business objects are, for example, P&IDs, but they are also called test procedures, test protocols, so all the information you need to design, to build, and to hand over a ship project. These are your business object, and you should stay focused on these POs. Yeah? The input and output relations, as shown here, these shows the information flow within your business departments. Yeah? And now, Johannes, when you simply add the information in which IT applications these objects are created and managed, then you can easily go from the business architecture to the IT architecture, and then you can do PLM architecture.
Thank you, Jan. That was pretty interesting. So what I got from you is that the definition of business objects and the analysis of information flow is crucial. So the critical point is to define the business objects in a way that you're able to deal with the complexity of the system on the one hand, without getting lost into detail and finally paperwork not implemented.
Yes.
So the sticking point is to define as much as needed and as less as possible.
Yeah.
Not that easy. We got some introduction of different methods and approaches, and now we're interested on how that could be applied into practice. Have you brought some examples for us from practice?
Of course, I did.
Thank you very much. That's great. The floor is yours.
So thank you, Johannes. Thank you for the excellent summary and the good handover to the second part, where I will focus on some industry insights, some examples. So each specific situation at a shipyard, for example, a new shipbuilding project or a new shipyard strategy, provides new challenges, new requirements for your PLM architecture. Today, we focus on 3 examples. The first example is about the integration. The second example deals with ship development process, and last but not least, we will talk about collaboration as a new shipyard strategy, for example. Of course, there are many more examples out there, but today we focus on 3 from our current project, and the first example deals with integration. Yeah. So our example shipyard has all the required IT applications in place. So they have a CAD, they have a PLM application, ERP, CFD application, everything is installed. And as a next step, these IT applications need to be integrated in such a way that your business processes are well supported. Yeah. And for this task, it is required to understand which information, which BOs, are created by which IT application and also managed by which IT application. Yeah. Based on the input-output relations, as I explained it before already, you see, okay, that this IT application requires this kind of information from another IT application. Yeah. So, for example, the business object 3D model is created within your shipbuilding CAD application, and the business object weight report is created within your PLM application. Based on the already collected defined BO network, you know that the weight report relies on several inputs, and one input is, for example, the 3D model. Yeah? The information of the generated weight from the 3D model need to be transferred to the weight report. The weight report is in PLM system, so the information of the weight need to be transferred from shipbuilding CAD to the PLM application. And such an approach ends then in the different use cases. So of course you will not have one use case only about transferring the weight. Yeah? So you will combine several information you need to transfer from the CAD to the PLM, for example. You will have different use cases in the end. And of course, it will be a bit more complicated than this because you will have more than 10 business objects, maybe 200. You will have many more relations. You need to manage this, but in the end, it's the same concept. When you know what you do on the information side, you can then go to the technical side. So from the business to the information to the IT architecture, and then you can work on the integration. Now, I would like to go a bit more into details for the first step, how we collect this information. And this is also quite simple. So we have a best practice here. It's called BO collection by CPOC approach, as you can see it here. So each business object has an input and an output, as illustrated here by the different colors. Yeah. So we have a supplier, we have an input BO, we have then in yellow the business object with the specific information we are looking for. And when you remember the major components of the first part of the enterprise architecture concept, I talked about stakeholders. So you can ask who is responsible for this business object. So you see that the theory and the practical method is well connected, otherwise it will not work. Clear. And when we focus on the technical integration here, we should also capture information regarding authoring tools, management applications, format, but maybe also some information regarding how often these information should be transferred, and also if the integration should be automatically done or done by hand because it happens only once a month and so on. So all this information should be captured. In the end, it is not that super complicated. It's some work, yeah, but makes sense to do it. Example 2. Yeah, this example is similar to the first example, but looks completely different, I know. Yeah, so you see a simplified ship development process with the different phases at the top: basic design, detail design, manufacturing. You have on the left side the different departments from your shipyard, from our example shipyard, and you have the milestones. So now the same shipyard from the previous example is interested into a more accurate project planning and baseline solution. Yeah, and the idea is quite simple. We simply assign the collected business objects to the milestones, and by adding these project planning aspects to the BOs, the shipyard is able to estimate the workload per milestone much better. The shipyard is able to identify the impact when you need to move a milestone, for example. And last but not least, this is a main feedback. Yeah, the whole exercise is very important for the shipyards because the people who are involved in this exercise noticed what kind of information generated by them is needed by other people. Yeah, so we call it also communication. And this illustrates or shows this kind of what is needed when in a very good way. Yeah, it is an exercise to make sure that all the departments working speaking the same language and talking about the same things. Yeah, some shipyards don't need this. Some shipyards they really need this exercise. My opinion. Good. As I said, it's similar to the first example, and of course this time we didn't focus on the technical aspects, but on aspects like what is the workload, what is the effort, what is which phase or milestone is connected to this business object, and then based on this information you can build up or detail your existing ship development process or adapt it for the new project, for the new portfolio of ships what you want to build with your shipyard. Easy, of course. So this was the second example. Now let's go to the last example, and the example number 3 is about collaboration. So again, same shipyard. They are happy with the BO network, they are happy with the new ship development process, but they noticed that the shipbuilding projects in general are getting more and more complicated, and they need to outsource some design and manufacturing tasks to their partners. And by the way, this is a trend we notice all over the world within the shipbuilding industry. So it's quite a realistic example here. Before I start, I hope you remember this decision tree for collaboration. Yeah, and this was presented by Lucas in the second episode, and that time Lucas mentioned it makes sense that you categorize your partners. When you want to do collaboration right, it really makes sense to categorize your partners into some types. So back to our example, let's assume that our example shipyard has 4 different partner types. The first partner type is, for example, about design offices. The second partner type could be about turnkey suppliers doing design and also doing cabin manufacturing stuff and deliver it as a turnkey part to the shipyard. On the right side, you see the PLM architecture of our well-known shipyard, and it consists of PLM, CAD, ERP, and also the well-known and very famous network drive. Yeah. In the middle, you have a consolidated collaboration layer, which shows the business objects which are transferred or need to be transferred between the partner and the shipyard. Yeah? And in the end, you as a shipyard, you need to check if, for example, the network drive managed business objects are still suitable for collaboration. Yeah? So that means it's a very good example when you have a new shipyard strategy, for example, to focus on collaboration. Yeah? This has an impact on the PLM architecture. You cannot always continue the same way as you did it the last 20, 30 years. Yeah? So it means when you need to do collaboration, that some business objects, not all, need to move to another application which supports the collaboration scenario in a better way. Yeah? And network drive is not always the best solution for a collaboration scenario. Of course, it's a simplified example, but it shows the way how you can identify the challenges when you want to focus on collaboration, and it shows also that you need to do something afterwards. Yeah. So when you want to do enterprise architecture, at the end there are also some tasks you need to implement. And when you are interested into the business object within the collaboration layer, you can use this approach to collect the BOs. Yeah. So for example, you will have business objects sending from the shipyard to the partner, for example, for reference, like a general arrangement plan. And you have also business objects which are sent from the shipyard to the partner in a specific maturity, for example, the basic design in a 3D format. and you will receive back the same business object, 3D model, but in a higher maturity. So collaboration means you will send some information to the partner and you will receive some information from the partner, and you need to make sure that these information which you receive are well added to your existing PLM architecture. Yeah. So this was the third example. These were the three examples I wanted to show today. I hope you had some fun, you learned a little bit. I really enjoyed it. And before I will hand over to Johannes, so sorry. I have two main conclusions. Yeah. So the main conclusion is about enterprise architecture tools. Yeah. There are many tools available, and these tools helps you to model, for example, the business network, the business object network. It manages the relations for you. You can add information regarding your IT application, how it is connected, and so on. So you can list, for example, which information are created by this application and need to be transferred to the next application. So this is what enterprise architecture tools can do, and much more, but they cannot do enterprise architecture for you. Yeah? That means you need to know what you want to do. You need to check what kind of standard is maybe the right one for you, or maybe you don't want to use a standard, but you need to know what you want to do and then select a tool which supports you. Yeah. Second, and maybe this is the most important one, governance. Enterprise architecture is a strategic discipline and should be positioned like this within your organization. Yeah. It will not work when you do a little bit of enterprise architecture today and a little bit of enterprise architecture in 2 years. No, this will not work. You need to do it along with your PLM projects, along with your PLM architecture. Yeah, so it's a strategic discipline and should be positioned like this. This is what we call governance. Thank you very much one more time, and I'm happy to get the first questions. Thank you.
So, welcome again to our question and answers. The first part has been recorded for some reasons, and now we are sending live from our office in Hamburg. With me, Jan, he already presented, and Matthias joined as well, PLM expert for shipbuilding industry. So, welcome, Matthias.
Hello.
Thank you for joining and for contributing with your experience. So, we got the first remarks, questions, and the first remark is, as a data-driven approach based on BO is data flow focused, most enterprise architecture methods recommend a capability-centric approach. And I guess what fits to this remark is also an additional question which was raised as well, how to combine to concentrate on the necessary business processes. Matthias, may I post?
I can take this.
Yeah,
I can take this one. So, enterprise architecture methods, like mentioned by Jan in the presentation, they are often said to be a bit too academical by some of the companies that we talk to, and that's basically why we are thinking that a data flow-driven approach might be more close to the company's reality, because with our information flow analysis, we are following not only information flow, but also the value generation, digital value generation along company processes. And to me, or for me, there is no contradiction between a capability-driven approach and a data-driven approach, because if you remember the description of the SIPOC method that we are using to take or to collect the information along the information flow, we always also ask for capabilities. We ask for business objects. We ask for capabilities that are used to kind of process, generate, whatever you do, those business objects, and then we talk about results in terms of business objects again. And that means as a result of the information flow analysis, you would have both available information, business objects, connected via input-output, so being a flow, as well as capabilities, and you can basically turn the capability-focused perspective and the business object-focused perspective into each other as a result of the SIPOC approach that we are taking. So it's basically more related to the real world that shipyards experience, because they are creating deliverables, which we would call business objects. And in turn, we could, if we needed, or if need would be, could turn the information flow centric perspective of the result of our analysis also in the capability focused perspective. So that's working in both ways.
Yeah.
Any comment from your side, Jan?
Not really. Maybe some experiences how it works in the reality. So what you described. When I'm in contact with the users from the shipyard, it's always easier to talk about concrete business objects or deliverables. Yeah. So I'm, as a user, create a diagram, and I create the object within the diagram. So this is what they can easily provide as information. So talking in a language of capability is sometimes difficult, and then the whole process of the collection of information is, extended because they need more time to get it. And but in the end, when we have done the SIPOC approach with the Excel, there's most of the time one capability, for example, the creation of the logical design, and then the business objects like a diagram and the additional information are mapped to this one. So there's a relation of X business objects to one capability. And then what is then also interesting is you can check how many tools you have in place in the end to support one capability. Yeah, and sometimes it's also a hard effect when you have, for example, when you need to create something with a capability, you use in the end 5-6 tools. So this is what we also learn from shipyard or experience. Yeah.
Thank you for this really good answer for the exact examples. So I guess we can go forward with the next question. Why should I do enterprise architecture, and where are the benefits? Is the question of another guy from the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to give some answers on this, some insights on this?
Yeah, it's hard to say on an average level. So there's no answer for this question for all the shipyards. So you need to aware how complex your PLM setup is, and if you're happy with it. So if it does not support the current requirements from the business, as said before in the video, something went wrong, and then it makes sense to check ways how to do it better. And enterprise architecture is one discipline which provide tools, best practices, and so on to make it better, or to focus more on this area. So, and then what are the benefits? Was asked.
Yes.
The benefit should be that PLM architecture fits more to the purpose of the shipyard and to make it in a maintainable way.
I would call it management of complexity. So, but I think that Jan pointed out, or Jan spoke about it in the presentation earlier, that complexity is increasing more and more due to scenarios where more parties, more companies are involved, and due to the fact that tools are getting more complex, and also product ships are getting more processed, and therefore development processes are getting more evolving and complex. So it's a tool to manage complexity, and it's a tool to gain flexibility in a company that is on a constant way of changing and improving. That's basically the major benefit in my works.
Yeah, and maybe just based on some experience from the last weeks, there is also a good reason to have an organized communication about all these
changes within the company. So, for example, in some shipyards, I noticed that some topics are discussed within one team, and the other teams, they discuss a different topic about a different application, and in the end, it must fit together. And there, for this, enterprise architecture is a good platform when you have the governance within your company, that this discussion is managed, centralized. Yeah.
That's a good one. So it's a communication tool that is helping different people in the company, different projects that are maybe even happening in concurrency, to be also to follow a coordinated approach. And don't build silos. And create islands. So that's indeed a very
maybe not an explicit part of enterprise architecture, but when you take it centrally within your organization, it's one of the key benefits.
So what you said is that the analysis helps to handle the complexity of PLM landscapes. And of course, it's the topic, enterprise architecture is a topic which needs to be maintained. And I guess we have a question here which fits very well to it. So the question is regarding effort. So how time consuming is the information flow analysis? So what do I have to spend in terms of effort to do the first analysis to get this process started?
So based on maybe 3-4 projects we did this year and last year, I can say it makes sense to have one of these Excel sheets per department or per team. And then there's a general introduction round in the beginning, a workshop to explain the method. And then it takes maybe up to 2 weeks that the departments can sit down, make the input. And then after 2 weeks roughly, it makes sense to review it. So all sides, but maybe focus on the different departments and to check if the reported business objects are really business objects. Sometimes they are more processes, so a review is always good. And then after additional 2-3 weeks, when the quality of the collected data within the departments or teams, depends on how we split it, is on a good level, it makes sense to check it also with the other departments. So this is then the second iteration, step which is really required. And here we often have the experience that within a department, you are well aware of who consumed what and who is creating what kind of information, but the references between the departments, this is very often not perfectly known or documented, or you have a different understanding of the same thing, but you call it differently. So this is a more time-consuming approach to collect the data, and it depends how this is communicated within the shipyard. But all in all, the collection, when we talk about these few hundred, 200 objects in an Excel sheet for a shipyard, can take up to 2 months. And the idea is not to have a 100 perfect Excel sheet with all the information. So it's impossible within this short time to get it perfectly documented, because normally the shipyards didn't do it for the last 20 years, and then it's very hard to get a full perfect picture on it within such a short time. But our experiences based on the 2 iterations I explained is that after 2 months you have a good quality with some cross-reference checks, some workshops, and so on. So this is my experience. And then you have it in the Excel, which is not the end, but which is the main input.
Maybe we talk a little bit about effort. This was a bit of elapsed time. So elapsed time is between 4 and 8 weeks, I would say, typically. Effort is, of course, you need to have kind of a little core team that is doing the coordination across all the different departments. And those people should be available for support and also for helping the team in the different departments, or the department people who are mainly providing the information that you're asking for. So they have a bit higher workload, but for those people from the departments, from the different departments that are supposed to provide the information and fill out these zip sheets, we are talking about a single-digit number of number of days, and it's a small single-digit number of days per department. So and, it gives a little bit of a better impression of the real effort that we are talking about. So we are talking about, in total, we are talking about days, not many weeks, weeks, not person months. We're talking about person days.
Yeah.
So the effort for the collection at the beginning is handleable. It's not too much to get started, to get a good basis for handling the complexity. And I guess here the next question fits very well. What happens after the data has been collected? So how is the handling of the business objects, of the information flow, the outcomes of the information flow analysis after the first collection? Yeah, would you like to answer?
Yeah, I can also give an insight of how it was done at some projects. So then typically there's a step from the Excel collection to an enterprise architecture tool, what I mentioned at the end of the presentation. Because at this point of time, when you have all these information, the business objects collected, it makes sense to manage it in a maintainable way. And for this purpose, there are enterprise architecture tools. And then the tools can really great support you when you want to check what is the input for this application, and then you get an easy query which business information flows into this application. So this is also a reason a tool is more user friendly compared to Excel. And it's also not only about the usability, it's also how to communicate from this point of time then with the users from the shipyard. Because then you can also display most of the time in such a tool in a 2D view where you have the business objects and the relations are drawn. And this helps then also to bring this discussion on a different level, to talk with the people about these details. Okay, maybe this is also connected to this and that. And then when you have it in a tool, you, as mentioned, you need to know what you want to do. So a tool does not automatically do enterprise architecture for you, but you need to know, okay, what kind of a capability you want to improve in the future, which business objects are affected by this, and then a tool supports you by the decisions you need to do. Something to add?
No, I think this was a good summary. So
and
maybe again, as I mentioned earlier, it's a communication tool, and it's a coordination tool across projects. So it's a very good idea and good practice to maintain the collected information over time as it changes, because company is changing, company is executing improvement projects, implementing new processes, methods, tools, whatever. And it's always good to follow this up in the architecture model, whatever the model might be, and to always keep a digital twin, if you want, of your company up to date, and have it available for discussions about the next steps to be taken. So that's basically the recommendation to use the created model after it was initially done, and then maintain it over time.
And then it's also, once it's in the tool, so I remember one example from a shipyard, they were interested how big is the impact to replace a specific application. So, and then when you have these information up to date in a tool, which is not super time consuming, it's quite easy to make a good answer to these kind of questions, which happen sometimes at the shipyard. The impact of replace a tool or to improve the change management capability, what is affected, and so on. So we recommend to use such a tool from my point of view.
Good point. Thank you very much. Let me check. We don't have any further remarks or questions. Of course, as usual, if you have any questions afterwards, please send us an email, contact us. we will send some answers to the questions around, also to the questions raised during this session. And at that point, I have to say thank you, Jan, thank you, Matthias, and thank you, audience, for participating, for joining. We hope that you enjoyed this session, that you gained some insight, and that we will see us again sometime in future. So thank you very much and have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.